It was deep winter on the Eastern Front. Snow stretched endlessly across the landscape, white, silent, and deadly. Temperatures plunged below minus 30 degrees, and the air carried a stillness that could only mean one thing. Somewhere out there, men were hunting each other. Between the ruined forests and the frozen trenches, a single rifle's echo could change the course of an entire battle. The Mosin Nagant rifle, old, simple, and brutally reliable, had become a legend of its own during World War II. But this isn't just another story about a rifle. This is about a man who used it in a way so unconventional, so forbidden, that even his comrades whispered about him. A sniper who disappeared into the snow and reappeared only in death reports. 10 enemies gone, one by one, all in a single day. No medals, no official recognition, just silence, and a trick that was never supposed to exist. To understand how it happened, we have to go back to a time when both sides, the Soviets and the Germans, were locked in the bloodiest and coldest war the modern world had ever seen. It was 1942, the year of desperation. The Battle of Stalingrad was raging far to the south, but along the northern sectors near Leningrad, smaller units were still locked in brutal skirmishes across the frozen tundra. In those endless forests, where even the trees seemed dead, snipers ruled. The Soviets had mastered the art of camouflage. Their sharpshooters wore white snowsuits, melted snow on their faces to avoid frost, and learned to hold still for hours. But one soldier, known only by his call sign Volk, meaning the wolf, took things further. He believed invisibility wasn't about what you wore, but what you became. Volk had been a hunter before the war. He knew how animals blended with their environment, not just by color, but by scent, by rhythm, by silence. When he was conscripted into the Red Army in 1941, he brought with him a strange belief that to truly disappear, you must make the enemy's eyes forget you exist. He was issued a Mosin Nagant M91/30 rifle, the standard sniper weapon of the Red Army. Long, heavy, but astonishingly accurate in the right hands. Fitted with a PU scope, the Mosin became a deadly companion for those who could master it. And Volk did, to a terrifying degree. At first, his methods drew attention. He covered his rifle with strips of snow-stained cloth, smeared mud across his scope, and refused to wear regulation white. His uniform was patchy, discolored, a strange mixture of grays and browns. His commanding officer reprimanded him for breaking uniform standards. Volk only smiled and replied, "If they can't see me, they can't shoot me." The truth behind his forbidden trick would only reveal itself much later. In January 1943, Volk's unit was positioned on the outskirts of a ruined village north of Lake Ladoga. The Germans had taken the high ground, a frozen ridge overlooking the approach road. Every attempt to advance was cut down by enemy snipers hidden among the birch trees. The Soviets had already lost 3 scouts that morning. Then came the order, find the sniper, eliminate him. Volk volunteered. He carried nothing but his rifle, a small pack, and a handful of snow wrapped in cloth. He crawled across the ice on his stomach, inch by inch, using the frozen gust to mask his movement. What he did next would later become the center of rumors among his unit. The forbidden camouflage trick. Instead of wearing his white snowsuit, Volk did something no one else dared to do. He stripped it off and rolled in a mixture of soot and snow from a burnt-out truck nearby. Then he smeared his body with thin mud from beneath the frozen crust. A grotesque mixture of gray and brown that made his outline vanish against the burnt snow and frozen soil. To the human eye, he didn't look like a man anymore. He looked like a part of the battlefield, a discarded shadow among ruins. For hours he didn't move. His breathing slowed to a whisper. Even his rifle seemed to freeze into the earth. Through his scope, he could see faint flashes of light, reflections from the enemy sniper's scope in the distance. Volk waited. The sun was sinking, casting long, deceptive shadows across the snowfield. Then, just before dusk, a single shot cracked the air. The German sniper, gone. But that was only the beginning. By dawn, reports started to reach the Soviet command post. 10 enemy soldiers were found dead across the ridge, all single shots, precise, clean. No movement detected. No return fire heard. Only one rifle, one man, and a camouflage trick no one had ever been taught. Some called it witchcraft. Others said Volk had gone mad. But those who served with him swore he could blend into the land like smoke, that he could watch an entire platoon walk right past him without realizing they were being hunted. The Army command never confirmed the story. No official record of Volk's full name exists. Some historians claim his tale was a myth created to inspire Soviet morale. But the sniper's logbook, later recovered from a destroyed bunker, told a different story. 10 confirmed kills in one night, with strange notes scribbled beside them, became the ground. Eyes forgot me. What exactly did that mean? How could a man become the ground? That question would haunt military historians and sniper schools for decades. Because if it were true, Volk's method didn't just challenge the rules of camouflage. It defied the limits of human patience and control. And in the next part of our story, we'll uncover how his so-called forbidden trick worked and how it changed sniper warfare forever. When the reports of Volk's 10 silent kills reached headquarters, disbelief spread through command tent like wildfire. 10 confirmed targets, all struck within a few hours, no counter-sniper activity detected, and not a single sign of movement. It didn't fit any known pattern of engagement. Soviet intelligence sent a junior officer to verify the claim, assuming it was exaggerated, perhaps even fabricated for morale. But when he arrived at the ridge, the truth hit him harder than any bullet. Each German body was found positioned in cover, behind logs, inside foxholes, or concealed among trees. They hadn't been ambushed in a group. They'd been hunted individually, one by one, as if the sniper had mapped their breathing patterns. Every shot hit the same way. High chest or neck. No misses. No wasted ammunition. Whoever did this had eyes sharper than steel and patience beyond reason. Volk, when questioned, didn't boast. He simply said, "I was not seen. I was not heard. That is all." But the real mystery was his camouflage method, the so-called forbidden trick. Soldiers who served near him spoke of it with both admiration and unease. One recalled, "He didn't look like a man when he went into the snow. His face was gone, just gray and black streaks. Even the birds didn't notice him." What Volk had discovered was a terrifyingly effective technique of natural distortion. Rather than blending purely by color, he manipulated the contrast perception of a human eye. Under the harsh winter light, a pure white snowsuit actually stood out as an unnatural uniform shape against the varied textures of snow, shadow, and burned debris. By mixing soot, ice, and dirt, Volk created irregular patterns that confused the enemy's depth perception, effectively erasing his shape without needing to stay fully hidden. It wasn't officially approved because it broke the Red Army's camouflage discipline. Any non-regulation gear could risk friendly fire or identification issues. But for Volk, disobedience was survival. He once told a comrade, "Nature doesn't follow rules. Why should I?" For days after his legendary mission, Volk continued to haunt the no-man's land between Soviet and German lines. His Mosin, Nagant, became an extension of his will. That rifle, a weapon designed in the 19th century, was now rewriting the playbook of modern warfare. Simple, bolt action, and rugged, the Mosin, Nagant slow reload speed forced snipers like Volk to make every shot count. There was no margin for error. Historians would later analyze his shots and confirm what marksmen already suspected. Volk's firing distances ranged between 300 and 500 meters. In temperatures that froze oil solid and turned breath into crystals, that kind of accuracy wasn't luck. It was a product of discipline and a deep connection with his weapon. But there's more to this story than marksmanship. What made Volk's actions extraordinary was his mental endurance. He could remain motionless for hours, sometimes days, in the bitter cold. His heartbeat slowed to almost nothing. He practiced a breathing method he called forest silence, inhaling so slowly that snowflakes wouldn't move on his coat. Some experts now believe he used early forms of biofeedback, controlling his pulse and focus through mental conditioning, decades before it was studied scientifically. In one report, a medic described finding Volk after mission half-frozen, hands stuck to his rifle stock. He was barely conscious, but when they tried to remove the weapon, he resisted violently, as if the gun was part of him. Even among Soviet snipers, Volk's legend stood apart. There was Vasily Zaitsev, the hero of Stalingrad, who became famous for dueling German sharpshooters in the ruins of the city. But Volk never sought fame. His name wasn't printed in newspapers. His feats were passed quietly, through whispers in trenches and campfires, a ghost story among men at war. And then came the strangest part of his file, the notation that eventually led to his forbidden label. According to one declassified Soviet document, Volk's final field report before disappearing contained the line, "The snow is my friend, but the smoke is my shield." What did he mean by smoke? Years later, recovered enemy reports shed light on it. German patrols mentioned a faint mist or gray shimmer seen in the forest before soldiers vanished. Some suggested the sniper used burning soot mixed with snow to create a haze that broke up light reflections on his scope, a primitive yet ingenious form of optical disruption. In other words, Volk wasn't just using camouflage, he was altering the physics of visibility itself. By reducing the glare from his lens and creating microdiffusion of light around his body, he made himself invisible even under direct observation. Modern military snipers use similar techniques with camouflage nets and ghillie suits. Volk achieved it with nothing more than snow, ash, and instinct. Today, researchers who studied his rumored technique refer to it as contrast inversion. It's based on the idea that the human brain identifies shapes by contrast, not color. By dulling edges and reflecting ambient tones, Volk made himself look like part of the landscape. He wasn't hiding in the snow. He was hiding as the snow. This forbidden trick violated every uniform code, every training manual, and yet it worked with terrifying precision. Soviet command couldn't officially acknowledge it without admitting that one rogue sniper had outperformed their entire doctrine. So they buried his name and erased his records. But legends don't die easily. Veterans who fought near Lake Ladoga would still speak of him in the decades that followed. They said that on certain foggy mornings, the frost on the ground seemed to move, like a shadow crawling across the ice. "That's the wolf," they'd say quietly, still watching. By the end of 1943, Volk's whereabouts were unknown. Some claimed he was killed in an artillery barrage. Others said he simply walked into the forest one night and never returned. The Mosin, Nagant rifle found near his last known position had 10 notches carved into its wooden stock, one for each of his final kills. But perhaps the strangest thing discovered in his abandoned hideout wasn't the rifle or the shell casings, or even his camouflage scraps. It was a small handwritten note, pressed into snow under a rock. It read, "The land hides those who listen." And that single phrase would echo through generations of snipers and soldiers alike. A cryptic message from a man who had turned the battlefield itself into his ally. Yet Volk's story wasn't over. In the next and final part, we'll uncover what really happened during his last mission and how one impossible shot turned a wolf into a ghost of the Eastern Front. By February 1943, the war around Lake Ladoga had reached a fever pitch. Soviet forces were clawing their way through frozen forests, desperate to break the siege lines. The Germans, though battered, fought with grim precision. Every inch of ground was bought with blood. And somewhere within that white wasteland, Volk, the wolf, had gone silent. For weeks, no one had heard from him. His observation post, hidden beneath a collapsed barn, was found empty. Only the marks in the snow told the story of a man who had moved carefully, deliberately toward the enemy lines. Some believed he'd been reassigned. Others whispered that he'd crossed into enemy territory on his own. Then, on the morning of February 18th, Soviet scouts near the frozen ridge reported something strange. German patrols moving nervously, retreating from their positions. They'd lost a senior officer to a sniper the night before. One shot, perfectly placed. The rumor spread quickly. "He's still out there," a soldier muttered, staring into the distance. "The wolf is hunting again." By nightfall, the truth began to surface through intercepted German radio chatter. The enemy was reporting an invisible sniper picking off men near their supply routes. One report read, "Shooter cannot be located. Shots come from nowhere. No muzzle flash." Soviet intelligence officers listened, uneasy. Only one man fit that description. The next day, a Soviet reconnaissance team was dispatched to investigate. They advanced carefully through the frostbitten forest, guided by distant gunfire. Single, deliberate shots echoing through the still air. When they finally found the source, they froze. Volk lay prone in the snow, motionless, his rifle braced on a frozen log. His face was ghostly gray, camouflaged almost to invisibility. Around him, 10 German soldiers lay scattered, each fallen where they stood. He hadn't moved from his position in nearly 2 days. The snow around his body had hardened like ice, binding him to the ground. When the scouts approached, they called his name. No response. His fingers still rested on the trigger, his eye fixed through the scope. He was dead, but his rifle warm. The barrel was freshly fired. No one knows for sure how Volk died. Some said exposure took him first, his body freezing solid even as his mind continued the hunt. Others believed the final bullet found him as he pulled the trigger. But the mystery deepened when they examined his scope. The lens was shattered, cracked straight down the middle, likely by return fire. Yet somehow, his last shot had hit its mark. 10 soldiers, one impossible shot at the end, and a man who refused to fall until his mission was complete. When his body was brought back, his commanding officer refused to list him as Kia. Instead, his file read, Volk status, unknown, presumed missing in action. Perhaps it was superstition or respect, but no one wanted to write the word dead. The rifle was sent to headquarters, tagged for research. Inside the scope's casing, technicians found something odd. The inner lens had been deliberately darkened with soot. It was Volk's final innovation. By darkening the glass and reducing internal reflection, he'd made his own optical shadow. The trick cost him visibility, but it made his scope almost impossible to detect. To this day, snipers around the world use modified anti-reflective coatings and matte finishes on their scopes, all born from principles Volk seemed to intuitively understand. But Volk's genius wasn't mechanical. It was psychological. He didn't fight with just bullets. He fought with perception. He knew fear was the deadliest weapon on the battlefield. When German soldiers began whispering about a ghost sniper who could blend into the snow, panic spread faster than frostbite. Patrols started firing at shadows. Men refused to leave their bunkers after dusk. Volk didn't just eliminate soldiers. He broke the enemy's nerve. Military historians often debate whether his story was real or myth. Some claim he was a composite figure, inspired by several Soviet snipers who operated in that region. Others argue that the field notes, the rifle, and the enemy reports prove otherwise. But the most haunting detail comes from a diary found years later in the ruins of that same ridge. It belonged to a young German lieutenant. On the last page, scrawled in pencil, it read, "We are watched. The snow moves when we do." There's something profoundly unsettling about that line. It suggests that even the enemy believed Volk had transcended human limits. He had become one with the land, his presence so deeply woven into the landscape that reality itself seemed to bend around him. And perhaps that was the essence of the forbidden camouflage trick. It wasn't just about color, shape, or sound. It was about the art of disappearing from a mind, to erase your identity so completely that even when you're standing in plain sight, no one truly sees you. Modern sniper schools still teach the importance of breaking outlines, masking movement, and using light distortion. But they also emphasize something Volk knew instinctively: patience, stillness, and psychological dominance. The ability to wait, to listen, to become nothing. After the war, his Mosin, Nagant rifle was lost. Some say it was destroyed during a post-war purge of classified equipment. Others insist it still lies buried somewhere under the permafrost near Lake Ladoga, preserved by the cold. Hunters and historians have searched, but the snow keeps its secrets well. And yet every winter, when the wind howls across the Russian plains and the snow falls thick and silent, soldiers stationed in that region still tell stories. They speak of a faint echo of a rifle shot, far off in the woods, where no man stands. They call it the wolf's whisper, a sound that comes from nowhere, a reminder that once there was a man who defied the rules of war, who blended with the world until the world itself seemed to protect him. And as the legend of Volk endures, one truth remains. Sometimes the deadliest weapon on the battlefield isn't firepower or speed or numbers. It's the mind of a man who's willing to become invisible